The New Orleans Saints should absolutely look to re-sign cornerback Paulson Adebo. We got all of that and a little bit of lanyap for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, your friend Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as a Saints beat writer over at LouisianaSports.net and Saints analyst with WWL TV. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, speed and athleticism are going to be very important for linebackers in Brandon Staley's scheme. I'll explain why, and we're going to kick everything off with a look at cornerback Paulson Adebo, who the New Orleans Saints should absolutely work to re-sign this offseason. We appreciate you very much, as always, for making us a part of your day, making us your first listen, and for being an everydayer here on the show, which is a proud part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I don't care about the defensive pass interference penalties. The New Orleans Saints should absolutely make one of their top priorities this offseason the re-signing of cornerback Paulson Adebo. Paulson Adebo is coming off of a season-ending injury in 2024. Yes, he is coming off of another season that has been littered with defensive pass interference calls, things like that. Yes. And I'm going to be honest with you, I don't care. I'm going to borrow the meme. I do not care. When it comes down to it, the injury to Paulson Adebo, which I actually very much do care about because he's a good dude. I don't like seeing guys get hurt. But him coming off of that injury does not seem to be an issue. Everyone that I've spoken to around him seems to feel that the surgery went well, that the injury is one of those. Remember, he had a weird injury. It was a broken femur, which does not happen very often in the league. And that injury being one that was repaired and that everybody feels like is one of those deals to where like it's stronger after it's surgically repaired than beforehand, or after it's healed than beforehand, and all those other things. And then you look at the videos that he's been posting online, and that clearly shows that at least his recovery is going in the right direction, running, and I'll call it an alleged 21 miles an hour. He posted a video of him running on a treadmill, and in the text of that video on the social media platform, he wrote 21 mph with a stock up chart emoji. So that is implying to me that he is running 21 miles an hour in that video. The reason why I say alleged is not because I don't believe it, but it's because there's no way for me to confirm that. I'm not smart enough to tell if a guy's actually running 21 miles an hour in a video. There's no video aid inside the video or anything like that. But allegedly running 21 miles an hour on a treadmill, and then, of course, jumping, leaping, dunking, and landing, perhaps most importantly, after dunking a basketball on a basketball court. And so you can see that at least the physical ability is there, the recovery is going well, all those other things. And so I think you look at all that, and then you look at what his market will be this offseason. While SpotRack has his market value set at $11.11 million, which, first of all, is not bad, all told. There's no telling if he's actually going to get that coming off of the injury. Again, with the SpotRack sort of projections, I don't know if that's been adjusted for after the season or if that was the projection going into the season, whatever that might be. But him being in a contract year, I think that he is a priority must re-sign for the New Orleans Saints. He fits what it is that Brandon Staley wants to do very well. I mean, he causes incompletions. He takes the ball away. He's forceful at the catch point. He's physical in the run game. He is a good contributor in the run game as well. He's somebody that has scheme versatility, has already played in a defensive system that asks from him about the same split of zone to man that would be asked from him in Brandon Staley's system, and playing in a system that uses a lot of pattern matching, which adjusts what you're doing post-snap after you see what receivers and route runners are doing in their releases off the line of scrimmage, who cuts in, who cuts out, all those other things. His ability to be able to recognize those patterns is already built in, as he's a former wide receiver himself, something that will allow him the opportunity and the football intelligence to be able to make the right decisions and play under the correct rules, under the correct guidelines that Brandon Staley and that defense will have set when it comes to its coverage unit. There's simply no reason not to re-sign Paulson Adebo. And one person did make one good argument when they said to me, well, I'd rather get the comp pick than have the player. And I say that that's a good argument, even though I disagree with it, because, okay, that's at least there's something there, right? There's something that says I value that more than I value this, right? Even though I don't value it the same way, I can understand that position. But here's the thing. The way that I look at it is I'll take a top cornerback, a CB1, over a 4th or 5th round pick a year from now, any day. That's an easy decision for me. I'll take the guy that was one of the best corners in the NFL when it came to passer rating when targeted in 2024. I'll take the guy that is consistently forcing incompletions, breaking up passes, and has been leading this team in passes broken up for the last, 2 or 3 years, and has been a starter in the system since day one when he was drafted in the 2021 NFL draft. I will take that over a day 3 pick any day. But that's because I value proven over potential. Not everyone's the same way, right? A lot of people like potential more than they like what's proven. And there's always the theory of getting ahead and being a year early rather than being a year late. I completely understand all those things. But with a Paulson Adebo coming off of injury, a 1-year deal, a 2-year deal with some void years to help spread the cap hit out, knowing that you don't have a lot of players under contract in 2027 and thereby have a ton of salary cap space set for you in 2027, you can dip into a little bit of that. You can simply dip into a little bit of that to have a top cornerback. Then you've got Paulson Adebo on one side, Kool-Aid McKinstry on the other side. Again, Kool-Aid has played with these rules before, right? The pattern matching, the man zone transition or zone to man transition, rather, the rip Liz type defenses, all those things that are Fangio, Staley, Saban. There's a lot of consistency between all of that. Kool-Aid McKinstry, very much versed in all that, having played in Nick Saban's defense his entire collegiate career. And so you have both of those on the outside, and then you allow Alontae Taylor to go back to the slot, play that star role. I think you're in a pretty good spot for your building blocks for the future. Now, the only thing that I will say is that if you sign a Paulson Adebo and a Will Johnson is the best player available on the board, the cornerback out of Michigan in round 1, take him. Take them. You can never have enough good corners. The Saints proved that last year when they lost Paulson Adebo to injury and then traded away Marshawn Lattimore at the trade deadline. So yeah, it doesn't stop you from still also investing in other positions. It doesn't stop you from investing in the draft. But if you walk away from free agency, having re-signed Paulson Adebo and then added a veteran left guard in free agency, you're in a pretty good place going into the draft and then going into late free agency as well. So for me, re-signing Paulson Adebo has to be a top priority for this New Orleans Saints defense, especially because he should be a very good fit for Brandon Staley, who is now the New Orleans Saints defensive coordinator. Coming up next, speaking of Brandon Staley, in order for his defense to operate at its peak, a lot of range, a lot of speed, and a lot of athleticism can certainly help from the linebacker room, and the New Orleans Saints might be lacking in all 3 categories. We got that coming up for you next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook and our official sports betting partners here on the Locked On Podcast Network. I absolutely love FanDuel because I love live betting. Live betting is one of my favorite things. You kind of get to see how the flow of a game is going and then jump in and maybe predict a big time comeback or consider whether or not an underdog is going to be able to close out their victory, turn their lead into a victory. And in the NBA, there's a ton of opportunities to get in on stuff just like this. 4th quarter comebacks, leading scores, quarter bets, even more as well. And right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets by simply winning their first $5 bet over at FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets by winning your first $5 bet. Put $5 down on a heavy favorite tonight. The Orlando Magic 16-point favorites going up against the hapless Washington Wizards. A great one to put your first $5 down on and potentially walk away with $150 in bonus bets. Go ahead and check them out today. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. The New Orleans Saints' new defensive coordinator, Brandon Staley, has a lot of unique things that he implements in his defense, and a lot of them are departures from what it is that the New Orleans Saints have been doing in the recent past, which might be good news for the New Orleans Saints, who have not been the defense that they have built a reputation to be. They finished in 2024 as the 19th scoring defense, the 20th 30th total defense, 27th in passing yards allowed, 31st in defending the run, second to last in the NFL when it came to that. And of course, finished last in the division in the NFC South, due in large part to their inability to stop the run game and other pieces over on their defense. And so when you have tried to do the same thing over and over again and maintain the consistency, the cohesion, whatever, of Dennis Allen's defense over the course of years, since effectively 2015, and have failed to do so over the course of the past few years, better to fail doing something new, trying something different. And you're also just as likely to succeed as you are to fail by trying something new. So you might as well take a swing in a different direction. And that's what I feel the New Orleans Saints are doing with Brandon Staley. It's why I like the hire. The next thing, though, as we've looked at how the secondary has to adjust or is potentially even played into the strengths of by Brandon Staley's scheme, the star position, pattern matching, cover six, crashing down safeties, playing downhill, all these other pieces. And then while that seems to fit what some of what the New Orleans Saints already have in place, and then the odd front defense with the speed rushers and how that could potentially bolster, we have to think about the inside linebacker spots too. So as we've broken down in the past, a 3-4 defense would be a change for the New Orleans Saints if they decided to go that way. And again, that might be an incremental assimilation over the course of the next few years, implementation over the course of the next few years. It might just be a switch that they flip and say, okay, we're a 3-4 defense now. We'll see which way they go with it. But in that 3-4 defense, what it is that they do is 3 down linemen, 2 outside linebackers that can contribute to the pass rush, but also could, drop out and cover the flats. And then these 2 inside linebackers that are mostly tasked with defending the run and coverage. And so what this means is you're going to need a lot of range, you're going to need a lot of speed, you're going to need a lot of athleticism from these middle linebackers or these inside linebackers. Why? Because typically speaking, if you roll out a situation to where you're, let's say, in a 3-3-5 defensive look, 3 down linemen, 3 linebackers, one of which, or potentially 2 of which, are pass rushers for you, you run the risk of potentially, in your otherwise nickel defense, having to cover the middle of the field, not just sideline to sideline middle of the field, or hash to hash, whatever, but also depth-wise, right, from the line of scrimmage up to the sort of bottom portion of a zone for the safety. You've got to cover all that with one guy. If you have 2 linebackers back in coverage, you have to cover all that with 2 guys. That's all fine. But you still have to be able to not only get from one side of the field to the other and travel horizontally with crossing routes and things like that we see all the time in the NFL, but you also have to be able to achieve depth or crash down, keep things in front of you and crash down quickly enough to either disrupt the catch or make a tackle at the catch point. So with that all being the case, speed, athleticism, range are going to be very important with the linebackers for New Orleans. Now, you think about the top 2 linebackers in New Orleans, Demario Davis, who is well into his 30s, and then Pete Werner, who's not really a rangy coverage linebacker. He's more of a jack of all trades, master of none type, which is what we've said about him since the moment that he was drafted, right? He's going to be a 10-year plus pro in the NFL because he does everything good, right? Does everything good. He does everything well. But he's not really elite in any individual traits, and the inconsistencies have been a little bit of an issue for him as well. And so the requisite categories or the requisite traits of an inside linebacker for New Orleans might actually be a little bit underserved right now or underprovided right now. It's why names like Jalen Walker continue to pop up because, yes, Jalen Walker out of Georgia can rush the passer, but he can also drop back into coverage for you. You're seeing a lot of John Campbell's another big one that you see a lot in the draft and stuff like that could potentially land with New Orleans, a guy that plays a little bit more coverage, but also is a really good run defender and all those other things. Not as utilized as a pass rusher. I think only 100 pass rushing snaps at Alabama last year. Still enough for you to be able to, build off of and things like that. But for New Orleans, finding those coverage linebackers on the inside makes a lot of sense. It's one of the reasons why Willie Gay Jr. might actually fit better in this defensive system than he fit in last year's defensive system. And let me rephrase that. Would be utilized better in this year's defensive system than he was utilized in last year's defensive system. That's probably a more accurate and fair assessment of his work in 2024. And so I think one of the things that we have to look at as kind of an underrated need when you think about the New Orleans Saints is potentially rangy coverage linebackers. guys that can win with speed, guys that can win with athleticism, guys that have range and that can cover the middle of the field, that can get back in a hurry, but also crash down in a hurry if they need to and make a secure tackle in the meanwhile. None of this is easy by any stretch of the imagination. Linebackers do not have easy jobs in the NFL. And a linebacker who is playing inside linebacker on a 3-4 does not see his responsibilities reduced just because they're not asked to rush the passer as much. They, in fact, have more field to cover most of the time. So ideally, you want one of those stand-up guys to be pretty much a full-time pass rusher. Another one of those stand-up guys to be a hybrid that can rush the passer or drop back into coverage, a la Jalen Walker. And then you want your two inside guys to be good coverage linebackers. Now, Demario, I think, still has, I think we saw him be able to carry tight ends up the field late in the season, things like that. But you got to wonder, first time in a season that he missed in a game due to injury, you have to be ready for that to potentially and unfortunately snowball as an organization, right? As a team, you have to be prepared for those kinds of things. It would be ridiculous not to be. And so continuing to invest in linebacker play, particularly coverage, as well as guys that can get downhill and defend the run from the inside linebacker position, is going to be vital for the New Orleans Saints, I'll say, over the next couple of years. It's yet another position of need, quote unquote, for the New Orleans Saints this offseason, but really, they have needs all over the roster. Every position you can invest in this draft, in free agency, by re-signing, whatever it might be, every position you can find an argument to invest in. And this is my argument to continue to invest in the second level, and not just for the pass rushers, but also for the coverage guys. Doesn't mean that you got to go and blow a ton of money to do it. You can go and bring a Troy Reader in to help you if you're somebody that's familiar with Brandon Staley and his scheme, but can also help you out on special teams and things like that. Like, you don't have to find the top ticket guys, but you do have to continue to invest in the second level, because once those safeties drop back, once those corners are out on an island on the outside, and once that slot corner either gets carried somewhere or ends up, dropping down or pressuring or doing whatever it is that they're doing, the many, many things that position is asked to do, linebackers have to cover the middle of the field, period. Safeties can drop down, help, all these other things, but there's always going to be space in between where that linebacker zone is, or where that linebacker assignment is when they're in zone coverage, and where that safety third level starts. So you got to make sure you've got guys that can get back there in a hurry and make these coverage assignments work. That's why I think speed, athleticism, as well as range are necessary at the second level. And the New Orleans Saints have some investing to do in order to truly be able to maximize Brandon Staley's defense. If they can do that, which, if you want to look at the big complaint around Brandon Staley's defense, it has been spacing. That's one of the reasons, or that's one of the investments that can help you there, is to have those linebackers that can erase space. And so if you can do that, then I think you're in a really good place. But I think the New Orleans Saints don't necessarily have that to their full disposal right now, and certainly could spend some time addressing and investing in exactly that when it comes to inside linebacker. All right, coming up in tomorrow's episode, it is Mock Draft Monday. Tomorrow's mock draft is all about just trying to do everything that you can to bolster Kellen Moore's offense and help out Brandon Staley's defense. And we're going to do that from running back to linebacker to edge rusher to defensive tackle. Nothing left behind, nothing left untouched. We're going to dive into all that in tomorrow's Mock Draft Monday. We appreciate you very much. As always, make this your first listen. For your second listen, go and check out Locked On NFL Draft, mock drafts, big boards, player rankings, prospect breakdowns, everything you need with Damian and Keith over at Locked On NFL Draft. Go and check them out today. We appreciate you very much, as always, making us a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me in the show. If you see me, please say hi. If you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how you're momming them. And trust Who Dat Nation, I'll holla at you.